Alright, pushers. It's another episode of Mr. BAPUS History. Expansion War, the Sectional Crisis, the end of the Second Party System, the election of 1860, 1848 to 1860. Another day, another set of notes. Another quote. This time from John Brown, Kansas Territory, 1856. I have only a short time to live, only one death to die, and I will die fighting for this cause. There will be no peace in this land until slavery is done for. Quote number 2. An increasing hostility on the part of the non-slave-holding states to the institution of slavery has led to a disregard of their obligations. For 25 years, this agitation has been steadily increasing. A geographical line has been drawn across the Union. All the states north of that line have united in the election of a man to the high office of President of the United States, whose opinions and purposes are hostile to slavery. He has declared that, quote, government cannot endure permanently half slave, half free, end quote, and that the public mind must rest in the belief that slavery is in the course of ultimate extinction. We, therefore, the people of South Carolina, have solemnly declared that the union heretofore existing between this state and the other states of North America is dissolved, and that the state of South Carolina has resumed her position among the nations of the world as a separate and independent state. South Carolina Declaration of Secession, 1860. On with the notes. The California Gold Rush of 1849. Gold is discovered in California in 1848. California that had been recently acquired in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo as a result of the Mexican-American War. Thousands of minor 49ers moved to California to strike it rich in 1849. Some did find gold, but most lived in chaotic, lawless mining camps and towns. Most stayed and looked for other economic activities like farming, boosting the population of California with Americans. Forcibly took land from Native Americans and Mexican Americans, became successful in farmers and ranchers. Very quickly, the population reached the necessary population to ask for annexation. So California applies for statehood as a free state in 1849. This led to 4 arguments over slavery. 1. Slavery follows the flag. Slavery everywhere. 2. Extend the Missouri Compromise line of 3630. 3. Popular sovereignty, which was put forth by Stephen Douglas. Let every territory vote, whether they should have slaves or not. 4. No slavery at all in new territory. Zachary Taylor dies. Millard Fillmore becomes the president and is willing to compromise, which leads to the Compromise of 1850. Once again, the senatorial giant Henry Clay, the great compromiser, comes up with a compromise to save the day. California enters as a free state. The boundary dispute between Texas and New Mexico is settled. The slave trade, but not slavery, is abolished in Washington, D.C. And, for the southern states to make them happy, a strict Fugitive Slave Act. Future territories that apply for state will use popular sovereignty to determine slavery status. The compromise preserved national unity, but barely, and it did not make anybody happy. And it was a compromise, a true compromise among all these different propositions. Militant secessions in the South, known as fire eaters, were not happy and planned secession. The end of the Second Party System, 1850 to 1858. Resistance to the Fugitive Slave Act. As part of the Compromise of 1850, a stricter Fugitive Slave Act was supposed to be enforced, where the northern states were to send back any fugitive slaves. This was as a result of the work of Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad that was allowing hundreds of slaves to escape to the north into freedom. Slave catchers in the northern states led to popular hostility. Northerners actively and sometimes violently refused to enforce the law, making the South feel betrayed that they had helped upheld their side of the bargain, which was to admit California as a free state, but yet the North was not holding to their promises. This inspired Harriet Beecher Stowe to write her highly influential novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, depicting the immorality of slavery. The novel greatly helped the abolitionist cause in the North, and even in Europe, Northern states passed personal liberty laws that guaranteed jury trials. This angered the South even more. The Whigs disintegrate over the issue of slavery. The end of the second party system. In the election of 1852, Whigs choose Winfield Scott, another war hero, this time from the Mexican-American War. The Democrats choose Franklin Pierce. The Whigs split over slavery, and Pierce wins. President Pierce pursues pro-slavery initiatives to purchase land from Mexico that Gladstone purchased in 1852 to build a transcontinental railroad through the South, signed a trade-opening treaty with Japan, and attempted to annex Cuba with the Austin Manifesto in 1854, but failed. The Kansas-Nebraska Act, 1854. Stephen Douglas, a Democratic senator from Illinois, wants to take, quote, permanent Indian territory and create a large free territory called Nebraska. This would allow the construction of a transcontinental road in the north that would terminate in Illinois, his home state. After Southern opposition, he proposed the Kansas-Nebraska of 1854. Indian land would be split into two territories, Kansas and Nebraska. This act would repeal the Missouri Compromise and left the division of slavery up to popular sovereignty. Debate over the Kansas-Nebraska Act finished off the Whig Party and weakened the Democratic Party. Ex-Whigs, Free Soilers, and abolitionists joined together to form the Republican Party, 1854. The Republican Party opposed slavery. They were pro-social mobility, had middle-class values of domestic respectability, religious commitment, and capitalist enterprise. Enter the third-party system, Republicans versus Democrats. Thrown into the mix is the American Know-Nothing Party, also known as the Order of the Star-Spangled Banner in 1850. It was an anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic nativist party. They wanted literacy tests for voting. They also gained popularity. Bleeding Kansas, 1856. Pro-slavery border ruffians from Missouri clashed with anti-slavery abolitionists over whether Kansas should be a free state or a slave state, since it was going to be decided by popular sovereignty. Disputes led to two governments and two constitutions, and fighting. Pro-slavery forces looted and burned the free soil town of Lawrence. The famous abolitionist John Brown responds by murdering 5 pro-slavery settlers at the Potawatomi Creek Massacre. These acts of violence are why it's called Bleeding Kansas. And the fighting continues. This is before the Civil War. Election of 1856. Republicans and American Know-Nothing split the northern vote, and the Democrats win. J.B. Buchanan becomes president. The Dred Scott decision, 1857. Dred Scott versus Sanford, famous Supreme Court case. Dred Scott, a slave, sued for his freedom, arguing that because he had moved to a free territory, he was now free. The Supreme Court, led by Chief Justice Roger Taney, ruled that African Americans, slave or free, could not be citizens and therefore had no legal right to sue, and that slaves were property and could be taken anywhere, and that the Northwest Ordinance, which had banned slavery north of the Ohio River, and the Missouri Compromise were unconstitutional because the federal government could not prohibit slavery. This enraged people in the northern states. Buchanan's failed presidency. James Buchanan supported the Dred Scott decision. Big mistake. He urged Congress to admit Kansas as a slave state, which it didn't, and attempted to purchase Cuba to create more slave states. Also, a big failure. His aggressive pro-slavery stance divided the Democratic Party and the nation. Abraham Lincoln and the Rise of the Radicals, 1858 to 1860. Enter Abraham Lincoln, born in a log cabin, self-educated lawyer, Whig congressman from Illinois, became a Republican after the Kansas-Nebraska Act, opposed slavery in territories. He rose to fame in the famous Lincoln and Douglas debates when he was trying to win the Senate seat from Stephen Douglas. These debates made him famous. In 1858, Republicans win control of the House of Representatives in 1858. The Democrats divide into moderates that defended Southern rights but wanted to stay in the Union, and fire eaters who wanted secession. The radical abolitionist who had left Kansas decided that he was going to start a slave uprising, and he led 18 black and white men in a raid on the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry in 1859, hoping to start a major rebellion and end slavery in the South. He was arrested and executed for treason. This failed attempt at a rebellion further stoked Southern fears that all Northerners were trying to end slavery and would go to whatever lengths to stop it. The election of 1860. Democrats split on the issue of slavery. The Northern Democrats nominated Stephen Douglas. The Southern Democrats nominate J.C. Breckinridge. Republicans nominate Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln wins the election with no electoral votes from the South. Southerners were concerned about slavery, but also concerned over their loss of political power. Immigration and westward expansion were giving northern and western states more representation in Congress. The election of Lincoln in 1860 resulted in 11 states to vote for secession and to leave the Union. And that is the end of the notes on our next episode, the Lincoln presidency and the beginning of the Civil War. Until next time, make sure you like, subscribe, add, hit a comment or two. Let me know how am I doing. If you like these notes, what we could do to make them better. Until next time, pushers. Keep working hard.